My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I am the CEO of After the Fire. Welcome to the podcast, How to Disaster: Recover, Rebuild, and Reimagine. In this podcast, we bring you the very best practices, best hearts, and great ideas from other disaster-affected communities. Thank you for joining us. Welcome once again to the How to Disaster podcast, where we help you recover, rebuild, and reimagine. My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I am the CEO of After the Fire. Today's guest is Jim Alvey. Jim Alvey is the Vice President for Corporate Relationships in Disaster for a very cool national nonprofit called Good 360. It's a very simple but effective model. Essentially, what they do is they match, Good 360 matches corporate donations with areas of need. In particular, he sends out large donations, mostly goods, to vetted nonprofits. Jim, in particular, is in charge of disaster, which is why we're having him on today. He's going to talk to you about how he came to do this work, what he likes most about it, and what are the challenges. Donation management is actually one of the hardest things to do in disaster. We've already done a podcast, in case you missed it, with Jake Bentz. He was talking about doing donations and managing them on the local level. Good 360 really takes that same sort of model and approach, and they do it nationally for disasters, and that's what Jim does. So I'm very happy to have him on today. If you want to know more about Jim Alvey or Good 360, please look for the links, which will be in the description. And thank you once again for spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. Once again, welcome Jim Alvey to the How to Disaster podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
I'm very happy to have you. Before we go any further, I do want to give a shout out to our mutual person that we like so much, Jen Thompson, because I have a feeling this may be the only one that she hears, but I have a feeling she'll tune into this. I've known Jen for about since like 2017 years, since about 2005, when I was working for Newsom, she was working for Newsom, and our desks were right by each other. So anyway.
I still can't get over that. So we know we'll have at least one audience member, because Jen will be watching, and she'll also probably drag my sister Terry, so there'll be two.
There'll be two.
Yeah.
It's good. I like to call her the original Jen Thompson, and I get to be the I'm 2.0. That's me. So anyway, shout out to Jen and Terry. Thank you for listening. We love this connection. Okay, so Jim, you work for this really cool organization called Good 360. Tell us about it.
Well, I'd love to talk about Good 360. How much time do we have?
All the time you need.
Oh, okay, great. Actually, I feel very, very fortunate to have found Good 360, or if Good 360 found me. Either way, it's a nonprofit. It's a 501c3. It's been in existence longer than you would expect, because you probably haven't heard of Good 360 before. It's been around since 1983. And it's got a really cool niche. What we do, only a couple of other nonprofits do what we do, which is make it easy for companies to donate products and match them up with nonprofits that need them. Pretty simple in concept, right? So it gets a lot more complicated, particularly in disaster, which we'll focus on. But Good 360, if we have a mission, it's that we want to help close need gaps. It's what we call them. Need gaps are anything in a community or in the world that has two sides to it, where there's a lot on one side and not enough on the other. And that's definitely the case with products. There's way more products than anybody on this earth could ever use in their lifetimes. And then there's also desperate need, even in communities where we live, whether it's veterans, domestic violence, child education, wellness, lots of need gaps. And those can often be helped, at least, by products being donated. So we encourage our companies, fantastic partners from all different kinds of retailers and manufacturers, shoes to shingles, I say, and everything in between. And those get donated on a regular basis, or as needed by them to clear warehouse space, and often more and more strategically, where they want to do good. They want to use what they have as a way to help close those need gaps. And then the other side is that side of over 100,000 nonprofits that have worked with us at some time during those 38 plus years and they are constantly looking for ways to stretch their budgets. Nonprofits work on shoestrings. If they can get product donated to them that they don't have to go buy, it's more than a gift. It really helps them to do something else in their community because they're just going to put that money back into programs. So finding out who's out there, making sure they are who they say they are in terms of being vetted nonprofits, really critical for us. And then finding out what they need and then giving them lots of different ways to access those donated products that we can talk about as we go forward. But that's really it. It's kind of making it easy for companies to donate and matching up with nonprofits that need those exact products.
And I think it should be said that while, yes, it's a simple idea, and I love a nonprofit with a very simple idea, but executing a simple idea and having a simple idea are very different things. And so sometimes people have an idea and then they go into the actual, like, how do you do this in a way that you don't send, ice skates to Puerto Rico, after Hurricane Maria, which absolutely happened.
Yes,
how do you do that and make sure that you are, that all sides are being served appropriately? And you work in one of the toughest spaces, which is disaster. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, disaster definitely is the toughest of the spaces just because it's such a moving target and it's so critical to thread that needle that you talked about. And we've actually coined a phrase around it that has a mantra. I go to bed saying it. I know I've got you to say it. The right goods to the right people at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And we really do live by that. I mean, each one of those pieces has something important around it. We make sure that it's the right goods, meaning not what you just described. And we've got all kinds of crazy stories from winter coats being sent to Africa to birth control and Viagra being sent as donations, all kinds of crazy stuff. Not necessarily the right products, right? For any kind of disaster.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, for someone, sure. But
maybe.
I'm just wondering, like, how did they get Viagra donated though? That's in fact, anyway, what
we'll get to that segment two. Yeah,
that's crazy. So how did you come to do this work though? How did you end up in this position?
So background for me, primarily in media. Worked for Arbitron Ratings, now owned by Nielsen. So working in that side of things, always wanted to be that talking head announcer, but that wasn't to be. So found other ways to participate in media, both television, the ratings industry, and then lastly in media around newspapers and community newspapers in particular. Really loved that aspect of newspapers, which that's a very, very challenging industry right now, as everybody knows. So had to find something new. And then instead of doing what I had been doing, tried to utilize the same skill set for something else. And Good 360 just kind of popped up. And it's absolutely been perfect. Well, the same kind of selling that I was trying to do before is actually partnership skills. So finding out what a partner, a company wants to do, what they have, what they're trying to accomplish, and then finding a way to make that happen for them so that they can do something good. And it's been really, really rewarding for me.
So in the space of disaster, which is also breaking news, I guess you got there in that sense. What has been like, what's one of your most moving experiences with matching sort of that need to give with that need to receive?
Yeah, lots of them. And there's a recency effect to that, of course, because there's so many active disasters now. Just being able to do something, anything for Ukraine in that response, which is a totally different disaster. It's man-made completely. It's a war, but being able to have products that we're able to get from wherever they were in the United States, multiple locations, over to Poland and other countries, and then actually into Ukraine, I get goosebumps thinking about it because the need is so desperate there for such a wide audience. And unfortunately, being one of those disasters that is so different that people are going to kind of forget that there's an actual war going on right now. So, not to focus on that because it's timely. I would say that actually work that we've done in fires, because we've been trying so hard to help with wildfire recovery. Response is tough because it's, especially with fire, so fast. But long-term recovery efforts out in California.
And wildfire is just a little bit different of a peril, and I think that's been one of the challenges for a lot of national partners is to really learn their way through a space that is, we're also well versed in wind and rain. We even know what to expect after an earthquake. But wildfire and we've had 32 million acres have burned since
Mhm.
2017 alone in this
Yeah.
country. And I think that one of the things that we noticed right away was a lot of the offers of goods and services came immediately.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is that when it's all gone, it's all burned down. There's nothing left to muck. There's nothing left it's all ash, oily ash. And then that takes, 6 to 12 months to even clean up.
Yeah.
And then you start the process of perhaps rebuilding. So a lot of times what people need is 2 to 3 to 4 years out. How do you approach that?
Yeah, and you've taught me so much in the short time we've known each other about the difference of fire as a disaster. All disasters are not created equal, and there's a lot of attention, rightfully so, paid to hurricane season, which we're in the middle of, and we're going to see activity certainly. But it's almost like everybody waiting for the start of a race, like they're waiting for that. But meanwhile, as our team was talking about this morning, in terms of trying to pre-position product for hurricanes and hurricane season, where fire season for the West Coast has just expanded around to almost a full year event. There's almost no way to pre-position product because product's needed all the time. We have a donation of water that's been made available. We're going to send it to our partners in Oroville so that they can utilize it. That's not pre-positioning. They're going to take that water and get it distributed to survivors, for firefighters, those active in work for fires that are active right now. But your question's really good about the long term, because that's the forgotten part about disaster. There's sort of a sick sexiness around response and urgency of the impact, and then people lose their attention span. It's not just people, companies, foundations forget that the long-term work is really the hardest part and the longest part. It takes months and years. We're still working in recovery for fires from 2017 in California, and that's because of what you described. Fire's different than flood. Flood, you can remediate the mold that's occurred in a house from a flood, and then put it back into a position where the structure can be utilized again. When you see a fire impacted area, there is nothing left. In fact, as you taught me, it's worse than that. The ground that it's on is now toxic.
Yeah.
Can't do anything with it. So the differences in complexity around fire are just so deep. But what we found is that there are partners willing to do that, nonprofit partners who are willing to hang out there and work with what we call a long-term recovery group. The people that actually live there need to have their communities rebuilt and figure out how to do that. Those are the folks we love to work with, because they're there, they're committed for life, right? They're there to help themselves and their neighbors. And so we find ways to do that, whether it's with rebuilding products, literally from the ground up, from the base to the shingles on the ceiling. If we can provide roofing materials, we'll do that. But also those in-between products where you mentioned, that early response of water and clothing that shows up even not asked for. There's a changing set of needs that happens in that time frame of between response and recovery that is critical to pay attention to, and we try to do that.
It's such a until you go through it, understanding donation management as a potential boon or a secondary disaster is
Yes.
something that we've talked about a lot. And I interviewed this really great, he's not really a kid, he's 19, but he's amazing in Santiam Canyon, which I know you're up in there, Jake
Yeah.
Bentz, and he actually put off college after the Santiam fire so he could work in recovery, and he managed their local donation site.
Wow.
And I was like, so I'm glad that we have that podcast, and then yours is a national, even global donation management, and I should connect you with him ever.
Oh, please do. Yeah, we always say, and this, disaster recovery is at a local level. It's local. Yes, it's super helpful for the national nonprofits like Good 360 and our national friends at Team Rubicon and the American Red Cross, Salvation Army, the list goes on. But if they don't live there, they don't live there. So the local work that happens after the cameras leave, after the initial response work is done, is so critical to have experts on the ground that know what's going on and who's doing what. So to have a youngster, I'll say, in the midst, kind of passionate about it and doing something about it. Donations management is hard.
It's hard.
It's just hard.
It's an
Nobody
art
wants
form.
to do it. right?
And, it's kind of like, I think it's good for people to have lanes in disaster. It's good to learn the other lanes, and collaboration is absolutely key. And it's
Yeah.
really key to say, hey, you'll take this piece, I'll take this piece. And then we can, affect that change and the impact that we want to see together so much better. One of the things I love about Good 360 is, though, I think you are uniquely positioned to actually help in wildfire for the really long term, that, you are not afraid of long-term service. And, if you have 50 couches 2 years later, like, I know you can call me and I'll put you in any fire community that you would want,
Yep.
and build those relationships directly too, like you're already doing. But there aren't a lot of nonprofits in that space that have that very practical ability to do it without just overloading the local community. Because what we see is, like, in the campfire was the worst example. We had already experienced it here, of course, but in the campfire, I remember pulling up in Chico, the Walmart parking lot, and the field next to it was full.
Mhm.
And it was not, and by now most of the fire people who lost everything had actually moved into temporary housing, but there was a large population there that were not affected by the campfire directly.
Okay.
And then there was the largest, like a shipping container, like 40 feet by 20 feet tall, overflowing with clothes,
Yes.
headed for the landfill. And so it's also, an ecological issue. And this is why, if you've got that skill and you understand it and you are Good 360, why Good 360 is so important in that space.
Yeah, you're nailing it. And again, we're going back to that right goods, right people, right time. So the time part is really the key here. Is those goods probably could have been helpful at another time. If there had been some thought around working with nonprofits on the ground that were working with families and what do they need. Maybe they needed those clothes once they got settled and they had what they had, and now they needed more for the next season. It's that kind of thoughtfulness that we try to bring to the table. The stats around this are fairly staggering, and it's been reconfirmed, and Good 360 is going to reconfirm it again this year, that over 60% of the products donated in disaster end up at a landfill. Again, it's because of the opposite. They're the wrong goods to the wrong people at the wrong time. So just a little bit of thought behind, do they really need this, or am I just cleaning out my closet or my warehouse to send this product there? The other thing is, you've touched on it a couple times, what in our area we call unsolicited goods, meaning nobody asked for this. So you see on the news reports, and gotta love the media, I was in it, right? But what they try to do is get something out there that's attention getting and dramatic, and not necessarily the full story. So when they announced that in the Kentucky tornadoes that they need water and those poor kids need some toys, they are still dealing with an aftermath of what you described. Warehouses full of bottled water, warehouses full of toys. Yes, those toys could be utilized elsewhere in the nation, but that becomes a problem that somebody else has got to deal with. And in the midst of that reaction to that tornado that also just, along like fire, destroyed buildings, they've got to deal with toys that they have too many of and water that they have in surplus. So it's not just a minor issue, it's a huge issue. It's what we call the second disaster, because that second disaster is caused by people thoughtlessly sending things that were not asked for. Unsolicited means that no nonprofit said specifically, I need to have this volume of these things. It's just dropped off. And we hear about every disaster, we're sending truckloads of blanket blank, let us know who needs them. Well, find out who needs them first before you come with your trucks. It's that simple.
I just want to sit in that message for so long, because after we had our wildfires and we saw it, then of course, we're in other wildfires, and people, they wanted to help, especially from here into other areas. And on social media, they're like, I'm taking this truck up. And I'm like, did they ask for it though? Did they need
First
it?
question. Yeah.
And then I remember the person got a little bit upset with me, and it was social media, of course. And I was like, here's the thing, is that your need to give cannot outweigh what their need to receive. So
Wow.
you can't put your own
Write that
needs
down.
ahead of the people. Okay, you got that. Yeah.
Love it.
but that's what happens though, is that it comes from the right human condition to give. And it's hard to be patient when you really want to help and you feel helpless watching people suffer.
Yes.
But you cannot inflict that upon them and then make them suffer more, because that was
Yeah,
never your intention. But it's,
it sort of fits into that whole feeling of excess where they'll probably need this, so we'll just send it. Like we have too much, so we'll send it to them, and what they don't need, they won't use. But they have no idea what the volume of that translates to. And again, it's not just individuals who, God love them, have passion. They want to do something. We all want to do something when we hear about something like the floods that are occurring right now in Mississippi. We're getting flooded with requests to do something. Turns out we need to hold still for a second and make sure government isn't taking care of everything, and then fill in the gaps where it's needed. Just a little bit of time in between makes a huge difference. And again, at a larger level, individuals versus companies who have warehouses full of truckloads of things, please, please, please make sure you're reacting to a need that's been stated on the ground.
Huge. And one of the things that's really helpful in disaster is donations. Money, you have physical donations, and if people want to give money, then it's also okay to not examine this. I'm not one for like, don't pay your nonprofit people, you know what I mean? Like that,
Right.
That seems to be a big measure of it. But we got like gas cards, or we got gift cards for places that don't even exist here too. So that's just a waste. That's another waste of resources,
Oh boy.
And I'm actually really happy that that I learned when we were at that conference together a few weeks ago at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and that the National VOAD and Red Cross are working with a digital platform, like a digital wallet for disaster survivors, so that all of the donations can actually go on there onto one card on your wallet and on your phone, and you will know, and that will avoid sort of that. Well, here's $5,000 in gift cards, 1,000 of which are for like a Dillard's or something we don't even have here.
Any disaster conference I've attended, and I've only been in this space for just over 6 years, there's kind of a silver bullet that everybody comes to, which is, if we only had a platform where nonprofits could tell what they need and donors could say what they have. It sounds so easy and so perfect, right? So Good 360's tried that, other partners have tried that. And what happens is everybody's got to participate. So you've got to have all the nonprofits participating, or you're missing some of the needs and you may be duplicating services. And on the other side, donors rarely have time, companies, to identify somebody who's going to sit down and enter their donations into a portal. They need help. So Good 360's tried to help with that. For the Welcome US platform for Afghan evacuees, that was pretty successful. We had our company's donors tell us what they wanted to donate. We put that information in, and then nonprofits could reach out. But it's still really clumsy and awkward. Nothing beats, so far, reaching out to nonprofits to ask them what they need, and then reaching out to donors and saying, what do you have, and putting them together. Good 360 is kind of the secret sauce in there to make all that happen, because otherwise you just got the two sides that are not talking to each other very effectively.
And, we all wanted, because we all want to do the right, I think that we do want to do the right thing, but the nonprofit space can get really complicated in disaster because the inputs are so critical. Like, for your donor base wants to see them. So everybody sort of rushes into the sexiest space, which you referenced before, the most immediate disaster. They will get their content. It's not that they're trying to be bad people, but it's sort of required by the donors. And that actually breaks down collaboration at the same time, because everyone's trying to get the same shot, essentially.
Wow, it's so true. On that side, you've got the media trying to get that attention, that they were the newsbreakers about something that, unfortunately, in many cases, something went wrong. So that's what they're trying to identify. And people are interested in human drama, right? There's no two ways about it. So that is interesting. But gosh, I wish there were more stories about those in-between phases of, here's the good that's being done and the hard work that has to take place, whether it's mucking and gutting or shoveling out very dangerous toxic materials so that a house can be rebuilt. Who's talking about that, right? Where people put their lives on the line. And yes, firefighters working to control blazes, that's both impactful, important, and also sexy, right? So people want to see that somebody's out there risking their life to help them. So that should be covered, but it's the aftermath part that just deserves so much more. You mentioned something about technology. I don't want to drop that point. I am really happy that the American Red Cross is focused on a disaster hub. We hope to participate in that at some point. We just got to make sure that all the data points are all fair, safe, equitable, that again, it's helping, not hurting, that we're all in. So we want to kind of get that back on the table for discussion, that all the major nonprofits that are active, if we're all in, we're all using the same technology, that's a perfect situation. But if we're not all in, then we're likely to have that situation where the nonprofit that needs something isn't just going to ask one person or one company. They're going to ask everybody for what they need because they hope that somebody will give it to them. So it's all got to be connected really tightly. We are seeing great advances in technology, and I know you've seen it in California around detection of and mapping of fires and information on containment. Also, Crisis Cleanup does a wonderful job around data around structures damage. Their whole thing is identifying what structures, homes and commercial, have been impacted by this disaster, and are they destroyed, damaged? Is somebody assigned to work on that and help get that fixed and track that along? Love that use of technology, and I think more of that needs to be employed.
I love.
Fannie Mae provides mortgage options for you and your family. If you have a mortgage owned by Fannie Mae, you may have financial options available after a disaster, such as forbearance plans, deferral of payments, lending assistance, and counseling. Find out more from our Disaster Response Network. Go online at www.knowyouroptions.com/relief or call 1-877-833-1746 today.
I love the tech space too. It's something that we're super interested in at After the Fire, and I'm really pleased by so many technological advances that are coming along in the way of materials that are more resilient for any peril. Very excited about that. And detection for wildfires. We actually have had a lot of fires this year, but they've all been put out. We haven't had our hot wind season yet, which is coming up. But I'm a little nervous. We're all a little nervous. It's been a little too quiet this year.
Yes.
We've not seen it quite like that. But I do think, though, that in particular with Good 360, though, that it would be really interesting in wildfire to see you use the technology and use the platform to highlight, what a wonderful story it is to go into a community, 2 years later, especially that had renters. Renters often don't have renters insurance. And they think they're covered under their landlord if the house burns down, but that is absolutely not true. They are not covered.
Yeah.
So they are left with absolutely nothing. And so that's a huge gap in the market too. I feel like you guys are very unique in filling those gaps. And I would love to see even more stories about, how in year 2 and 3, like Paradise is only 10% rebuilt 4 years later.
4 years later.
Yeah.
And very, very well publicized as an event, discussed, it's not like it was a unnamed event or one of those that nobody even heard of. Highly discussed and media was on it, and still only 10% in 4 years. That's really, really sad. And some of that may be that, at a certain point in time, folks figure it's too late. They're not going to go back. The community is not there. So I'm not saying that's happening in Paradise, but the statistics show that if you don't get a community back up and running within 6 months, it's not likely to rebound. And I mean by like the businesses, commercial. If you're, your grocery store, your laundry, all the places that people will be utilizing, if they're not back, then that town has a very, very slim chance of rebounding. So it's really that urgency to get the right rebuilding and the right pace is about saving the whole community, not just rebuilding one entity.
I think there are also some great opportunities around building materials like you talked about. So what comes up for you? What kind of things you don't have to name the companies, but what kind of things get offered that are super helpful in the rebuilding process that you've seen?
Sure. Yeah. And if it's okay, I will name a partner.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Only because they've been, our relationship has grown from simply providing some funding to do what we do to GAF is the company. They're North America's largest shingle supplier who I never heard of before I started working with them. Most people probably don't know them. The shingles on their roof probably came from GAF. But what GAF has done is focus on all the different ways that a company can help. So I'll get to the technology part of it. So don't forget to remind me that I don't want to talk about that. But in the meantime, they've gone from just providing some funding to providing some shingles to providing warehouse space where we can store those shingles to providing products through employee volunteer events where they do kitting events for hygiene kits and cleanup products, to also now educational. They're part of our Disaster Recovery Council, but on their own, they're focusing on getting the word out about more resilient building, fortified building practices. And then I've gone one further step where they've got the first, not only two different technologies here, solar powered shingles and also fire resistant shingles. I mean, gotta love them, right?
You're speaking my language.
I know.
Look at me, I'm all.
That's why I love these guys. They're like the class A of a partnership where they've listened to what we're saying, hearing the needs and responding on all those different ways. Gosh, if all the companies in our country reacted the same way, we'd be in a different place.
May I say, I love everything about that, especially because, there's the term blue tarp that, so this is a different peril. So this is like this is wind and rain events that many times people are able to go back and live in their homes, even in substandard conditions. And in Puerto Rico in particular, they had about, I think it was 42 or 52% ad hoc housing. So a lot of blue tarps, and they had a huge amount of work to do to really document who needed what. And I really commend the people on the ground in Puerto Rico who have done a remarkable task over the past several years. But just that thing though of providing something more resilient, most people don't know until you experience a disaster that underinsurance is chronic. It's not an issue for some people. It's almost universally an issue. It's about 70% of people after a disaster are underinsured.
Underinsured, right.
And we also see uninsured, and that's where the Mennonites come in, and some of the volunteer groups that have to do volunteer rebuilds. And so we actually pull them out according to, was it like a super rural or frontier community where there were multi-generational housing, where they did fine on $25,000 a year. They had no mortgage, so they had no insurance. And then a wildfire comes through, and all of a sudden they are just another person in America trying to get by on $25,000 a year without a home,
right,
and without a way back. And having people who are willing, like this, is it GAF? Actually not only provide something that is going to bring down the cost of rebuilding, but that is also more resilient. And I really want to focus in on that because I think there's a huge market for that, a huge opportunity for other companies.
I agree. It's not just something that's for, nice to say, or that's really cute. Like, there's money to be saved here, from insurance to rebuilding to out of people's pockets. And, underinsured means that somebody gambled. Right, they had a chance to get the insurance they needed, but everybody's on a tight budget, and those that are on tighter than usual will go for the lower option if they can, and just pray that nothing happens, and then they're trapped because they're underinsured for fire or flood, and they're not going to be able to replace what they lost. It's also what I've learned in the space: unbanked and underbanked, which I hadn't heard about before.
I have not heard of that. Please tell us.
There you go. So Payments as a Lifeline is a kind of a fintech nonprofit, 501c3, and they've been working alongside of us. They deal with distribution of money as opposed to distribution of products. Same thing occurs there, where there are many in our society who either don't have a bank, don't know what to do with a check, don't know how to receive any funding that comes through any way other than cash, or underbanked, meaning that they have some access to bank facilities, but very, very little. And so those folks who the government's trying to help by writing checks are really kind of stuck. Their only option is to get a check and then go to a place that's going to take 25% of it to get.
That's called predatory lending.
Yes, predatory lending. Yes. So once you start to open your mind up to all the regular processes that we built in around insurance and writing checks, and you find out that we're indiscriminately discriminating. We're basically cutting out a large portion of the survivor world because they don't have what everybody assumes that everybody else has. So just another eye opener for me that we got to dig deeper, and not just assume that everybody's going to be able to receive things, whether it's money or product, in the same way. We've had product donations that have kind of fit in the same pattern.
Yeah, I think too, like, obviously COVID changed a lot of things. There's, for, some actually for better, people would get on camera now for Zoom, and we don't have to drive all over the place anymore in the same way. But yeah, but I think that it has sort of opened people's eyes more and more to who actually is, who's a necessary worker, how we experience, I call that a mismanaged disaster. It was a catastrophe, but how we experience society and our place in it. I think that we were all sort of captive at home and looking at, how that would affect it. It's also slowed down though rebuilds for fire because of supply chain issues, which look like they're about to be like better because of some recent legislation. That's all I'm going to say. Should help that.
We're going to go like this.
Right. Well, I've already gotten a call from an electric company saying, hey, the Inflation Reduction Act is a game changer for actually getting this out. It's green energy and into people's hands who need it. And I talked to anyway, I could go on and on. I get overly excited, but I think one of the things, just to go back to the insurance piece really quickly, is what people don't think about if they haven't been through a wildfire disaster and they haven't seen like that sort of level of destruction, is that all of a sudden, like in Sonoma County, we had to rebuild nearly 6,000 homes, and about 5,999 of those people never intended on building a home. They bought a home. They are not home builders. They have other lives to do. And so it raises the cost even more during COVID with supply chain issues. Plus, when you have a situation where people are like in the Boulder County fire, the Marshall fire, where even if they were adequately insured, everything else externally is making that process really, really difficult. And so again, companies like, not companies, but nonprofits like yours really go in and solve a very, they mitigate suffering. That's what we do. That's what we do, Jim.
Well, I like that.
I do it. We mitigate suffering.
One of our partners, SBP, says resilience is closing that gap in time between impact and recovery. And I love that because it's really what we're all trying to do together. SBP, All Hands and Hearts, a lot of the volunteer groups really get it because they're in the ground working with people. One of the things that they're doing that they found has been needed is to get that assistance that you're talking about. Nobody goes to school to learn what to do after your house burns down, right? Or is flooded or roof pulled off by a hurricane. We don't know what to do. So knocking on doors literally and saying, can we help you? What do you need? What's happened? And finding out ways that they can handhold a little bit to get some forms submitted to state and federal to try to get some money back. Because if you don't like the government anyway, and then you're going to have to fill out a form and share some information, you're not really likely to love doing that. But having those kinds of hands-on approaches is really, really, really needed. Lots of folks are more fortunate to have insurance, and that gets taken care of on their behalf. But there are populations that we need to be aware of that need that handhold.
They really do. They need the handholding. They need the volunteer rebuild. And the Caldor fire last year in El Dorado County near Lake Tahoe got a lot of attention while it was going on. And Grizzly Flats was in the news, small community of less than 300 people. 70% were uninsured, not under. No insurance whatsoever. And their community foundation reached out to us just to talk about the issue. And the hard thing is that like, we love SVP. They do amazing work. In a wildfire, there's no door to knock on. And
there's no door to knock on, right? They're in mobile homes, I believe, right? Where they can
that takes about a year. There's no rapid rehousing right now for wildfire, and you can't be rehoused in that space anyway, because again, toxic.
Right.
So there isn't the, and wildfire, these are mega fires. They burn really, really hot. So unlike a house fire, where you can probably keep your foundation and maybe your car didn't burn down, in a mega
Yeah.
fire, it burns much hotter than a regular house fire. So everything has to go. You cannot sell a house with a compromised foundation on it.
Wow.
It makes the whole space just a little bit more difficult, which is why you kind of hope for a tech solution.
Yeah.
And this is another reason why, though, in the underinsured space and the uninsured space, most people have to use their contents money of their insurance to actually rebuild, and then they rely on donations in order to furnish their home. It's a story
Yeah.
I've heard many, many times.
I think I may have told you this when we met at the chamber, that Terry and I, my sister and I, and the rest of our family experienced a house fire, when I was in 5th grade. And it was actually very helpful in what I'm doing now to know, in our case, the structure was not completely destroyed. They were able to build on. In fact, my dad used some insurance money to actually add on a kitchen. Okay, but that's a whole nother story. So we were okay, but we tried to hold on to as many personal possessions as we could. And to this day, those items smell like smoke. So
Wow.
even if things don't burn up in your house, if you have a fire, you're going to need to replace them or deal with a constant reminder that your house burned down. It's the smoke aspect of products kind of is untalked about, but I can tell you from personal experience, you're going to want to save just those really family heirloom type stuff, and then replace everything else,
Everything.
which is another
Drywall, everything.
cost. Everything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is a major national company that has, gets big contracts and goes in, and they can clean to a certain extent, but
Yeah,
they cannot remove that. But we've seen this a lot, actually, in the Marshall Fire in particular, a lot in Santa Cruz too. Most of our houses just burned down. That was it.
Yeah.
But the secondary smoke damage is huge, and it's very hard for people in that situation to actually get assistance. They fight with
Yeah.
their insurance company, and then their insurance company will say, hey, send it out to the company, to be professionally cleaned. And then it comes back and it's still destroyed. And it can take months.
Yeah.
And even when they come into your house. And so again, just a wonderful space for Good 360 to be in, and because you'll help the entire community too, which is just so important, because it's a traumatizing event. I'm sure you were traumatized at 10.
Oh, we were, absolutely. And you just don't think about it. My parents weren't prepared for what they had to do to replace what we lost, much less the fear of losing a life in it. We were very fortunate on all those fronts, but it also taught me, our neighborhood responded immediately. While the house was on fire, there were people walking down the street with bags of clothing, and toys and belts and all kinds of other stuff, which was my first lesson in unsolicited goods. But God love them, they were trying to do something, but most of those clothes didn't fit. We didn't want them. The toys were broken. Not to be, but that's what happens. People
It
out of the
happens
goodness
all the
of their heart
time.
we got to do something for this family that just lost everything. I've seen it firsthand, and it's a passion that goes deep. If we could just steer that passion towards, funding for the nonprofits that needed to do what they know they need to do, or to Good 360, so that we can facilitate product donations at a much higher level. It's part of our nature to want to help it immediately.
Such important messaging. Where do you see, from the last few years of disasters have been, really very much nonstop. And some people would look at that space and think, well, I'm exhausted by that. But there are those there, then there are us kind of like other people who are like, I'm just going to stare that down and figure out how to do it, and meet cool people who also want to stare it down. Where do you see the next 5 to 10 years in this space going?
Yeah, that's a great point. We do a lot of talking about self-care as we're working 10-hour days and beyond, and paying attention overly. I think we're going to need more therapists.
Yeah.
I'm only half kidding about that.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah, I think therapy is really super helpful in this space in particular, where you're faced with a lot of negativity and heartbreak, and you do the best you can, and you work really, really hard at it. I'm very fortunate, our team's very fortunate to be kind of out of the space where we help those on the ground. The people on the ground, the volunteers, the nonprofits, the firefighters, the first responders, they're face to face with this. And what a taxing thing physically and mentally to deal with. So I do think that there's growth that needs to happen in that space. There's also a big focus recently on diversity and inclusion. You and I have talked about kind of the challenges there of making sure that laws and regulations match up well with the needs in that particular community. But there's going to be a big focus on that, I think, in our space. And we just have to realize that what looked nice on a calendar before with hurricane season and fire season and tornadoes in December, just going to have to give up on that and be ready all the time. You know, September is National Preparedness Month, which started around 9/11, interestingly, and now has become more around hurricane preparedness. But what I'm advocating for is like year-round preparedness. Be prepared for anything. Whatever you thought was going to happen when, throw it out. It's going to happen when you least expect it. Mother Nature's got tricks up her sleeve that we don't even know about yet. And just being prepared for anything at all times is going to be the new way.
And, you know, to figure out, like, how do you do resilience and how do you do equity and how do you do inclusion? And, you know, I feel very strongly that you have to walk into a community and ask, what do you need and how can I help? Because people know what they need, and they're, you know, locally led and designed. Resiliency, recovery, rebuilding is key. Because they know also where the gaps are, and even when they don't know and they're in trauma, because I do go in and deal with, you know, and meet very traumatized communities. And even with my staff, I say to them, we might know all of the answers. We may not, you know, but we cannot spew them all out, because we have to make sure that they're ready to hear that piece of it. And if you can stay with them for the long term, you know that immediately after the disaster, it's unlikely that they, you know, it's such a life-changing experience to undergo a disaster. It's the made-for-TV movie you never wanted to be in, that you wouldn't watch on, you know, Saturday night for any reason. And you're not Brad Pitt, so it doesn't matter anyway. But you, you know, you look at it entirely differently, and you have to deal with the traumatic part of it.
It's
The
real.
community, it's very real.
It's very it's harsh. The feelings that are around that, the psychological impact around loss, physical for people who physically got hurt or are dealing with smoke inhalation and fire cases.
Or lost a relative too.
Lost a relative or a friend. Just the harshness of it is something that, you know, really, again, going back to the counseling, all kidding aside, there's a loss there that needs to be dealt with for most people that are in there. I would, if we have time to just really quickly talk about, you said, how do we do this resilience thing? And actually, we put some thought towards that. A couple of years ago, we worked with a set of nonprofits and companies and came up with what we call resilient response. And it's an educational campaign that we try to get in front of as many companies as we can. And it's got six tenets. Six tenets. See if I got it. And we've talked about all of them on this podcast. Proactive. Don't sit and wait for something to happen before doing something. Find out who your partners should be, who the government contacts are for an individual, planning ahead for what disasters might come your way. So being proactive. Needs-based, right? We've talked about that. Unsolicited goods. Don't send anything until you've confirmed that somebody needs what you want to send. So needs-based. Educational. So whatever you learn is to be shared. What we just did, we're doing, like we've learned some things in our space, but let's tell as many people as we can, whether that's consumers or leaders, stakeholders of any kind. Short and long-term focus. So we've talked about that attention span that happens. I think Global Giving says that 80% of giving happens within the first 6 weeks of a disaster. And then nothing. Only 12% goes towards long-term recovery. So, you know, for companies to say, I'm going to focus on those early response nonprofits, American Red Cross, Salvation Army, all those are going to be in that early phase, but I'm going to save something for the long term. So really building that into their strategy around how they focus on disaster is critical. Transparent, making sure that you talk about what it is that you're trying to do, set goals for an organization, and then say whether you met them or not. Sustainability fits into that in a big way.
But also say whether or not you met it. And then if you didn't, then it's okay to try something and fail. It's okay.
100%. Yeah, it's better. So then people know it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
You learn something in the process that you can then educate somebody else on. Why didn't you make your goal? Was it too high? Did you learn something about what you can't do? And then the last thing is resilience in general. So building in resilience into the recovery, not just hoping that things will work out better next time, but that fortified building that we talked about, in a flood zone, raising up the homes, building back with fire resistant materials where you can, putting in hurricane clips in your roof when you're putting this in. Most people wouldn't know what that is, but if you've been through a hurricane, you're going to try to build back better. So that's all those things kind of work together in what we call resilient response. We have companies pledged to it. We've got over 85 companies that have said, yep, we're going to try to do that. And we want more. So if any companies are out there that want to sign up, there's no cost. It's just a thought leadership space that we're trying to get people to think a little more thoughtfully and strategically around disaster response and recovery.
I know a wonderful woman in Australia named Renee Hanvin who started corporate to community about 12 years ago, and this is what she does too. Is she's the Australian version of like a B Corp.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to connect you with her. She just rebranded to be called Ready Resiliency. And
love it.
she does a lot of that. And she's very smart. And so I would love to introduce you to her because I have so much respect for her. And they have a lot of the same issues that we have here, especially with respect to wildfires. So she's a great colleague. And I can see how, because you are a global brand, how that might work out well for everybody. So I'd like to do
We actually have a sister nonprofit, Good 360 Australia. So we're there kind of already. So absolutely love to work with them.
I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll just consider this like a part one, and I'm very happy to know you. And I've known about 360 only since our disaster, so 2017. But to actually understand the philosophy better, I'm always a fan of, it's like Tool Bank USA. I love a simple model, but executed well. And it's just so important in this work that if you do set out to do something, that you actually have the capability and the capacity to follow it all the way through.
Yeah.
Because there's too often people who come in the beginning and they want to be heroes, and that's just pretty short-lived service area.
Yeah.
And
well, that takes into we're so looking forward to having Jake Weir from our team at your After the Fire Summit, because there's so much we don't know. We're really engaged students right now, particularly for wildfires. We don't know enough. We don't have enough partners on the West Coast. We need to have more awareness of both the challenges and solutions. And I think that we could really make a difference. There is a Northern California VOAD that's active. We're connected with them. It's a piece of the puzzle, but I feel like there's some other pieces that are somehow not connected. And it's a big state. And it's also, you've got Oregon and Washington as well, and Colorado now, that are often on fire. So just kind of starting there with you and learning more about it is exciting for us.
And anything you guys needed at any time, I'm passionate about this, and often I'm the only wildfire person at national conferences, and I'm always like, I know a lot of really smart people in this space. So I'm so glad that you all are sending him to be here and to learn, and we will always be at your disposal for whatever you need to learn more, to connect with communities. It is a relatively new space in disaster.
Yeah.
We've had wildfires before, but gosh, we've just had so many, and the need is so great and ongoing. And you said it before, it doesn't matter if it's December 30th,
right?
Colorado burned, and then they got a cyclone bomb the next day. And so, since this is where we're at, being more resilient, I would love to work with you on magical thinking. I've not seen anybody solve that yet.
Okay.
That it won't happen, and in that space. But also, how do we get a company that wants to donate Vulcan vents are really important. tiny
Yeah.
little vents. And IBHS will be at the summit as well, talking about wildfire hardening homes and what are like the 4 elements that you need most. And so
Yeah.
anything that we can do to amplify that space and to help you achieve your
Yeah.
mission, like I am all in on that, just so you know.
Oh, absolutely. Well, obviously, mutual here in terms of what you're doing, and the technology piece that you're going to bring into your summit. It's fascinating because, again, if you don't know, you don't know. So finding that, elevating some of those creative minds and products that are out there. But there's kind of like that baseline work that has to happen first. Right now, we're starting in the middle because there's fires that are active or going to be active, and there's already communities, as we mentioned, that are in long-term recovery. That 10% stat's gonna haunt me tonight for Paradise. That's way too low for that period of time. There's got to be faster activity on all ends there. Otherwise, we're going to lose communities, and that's not going to be good for anybody. And those people live there. They probably got generations that are there. They don't want to leave. They want to be there.
Yeah.
We've got to find ways to make that happen faster. They're closing that gap between impact and recovery.
Really important. They had such a large population of seniors, and seniors are the least likely people to rebuild for, that they, that it's there's the trauma, and then there's the cost, and then there, and if you're not working anymore, depending, and it was a very accessible community for people who didn't have high incomes.
Wow.
And, when we talk about doing equity, like there's a perfect opportunity to figure out, how to help. Now it's been 4 years. A lot of people, if they haven't started now, they're not coming back, but they do have new community coming in. So, that part of it is wonderful. And they have really dedicated people. So they have all the elements that they need. But it's just going to be a very long time. The entire town was also on septic before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So just working on that.
Yeah.
But I am, I think it's important that those of us in the space are just undaunted by the challenges. That
You have to be undaunted. Yeah. You have to be.
Like, oh, okay. So that means what? Like, what do we need to do for you then in order to get you home?
Yeah.
That's the goal. So,
And
well, go ahead.
Well, Undaunted is challenging, because again, in our brief huddle this morning on our disaster team, we focused on Jackson, Mississippi, because it's current, it's in the news in the States, and then followed that discussion with Pakistan and the flooding there that is going to affect millions of people. The difference between the two and the logistical challenges of trying to do anything to help in that country, just night and day. So I'm a big believer in doing what you can do and feeling okay about that, doing what you can do.
Yeah.
We could feel bad that we're not going to be able to help as much as we like in Pakistan, but we're going to do something. And we've got partners already on their way there, and they're gonna help us get involved. But the best we can do is the best we can do. So just trying to stay with it and pacing ourselves as we said along here with some self-care, but not being undaunted is a challenge.
It is a challenge. It's true. I probably am undaunted as part of a trauma response from having gone through. You know what I mean? I'm just like, okay, so this is how it's going to be now. And if this is how it's going to be, then I'm going to root for progress.
Yeah.
Progress is going to be perfection in my book. And I'm not going to worry too much if we can't, I expect it to be a very long haul. Having said that, though, that self-care piece is so important. And, certainly I've had my own mental health journey over the past 5 years. Like, I don't even know, I didn't even understand how traumatized I was the first year.
Yeah.
And so, then I had high blood pressure, and my doctor was like, "What's up with you?" And then I was like, "Oh, okay, I got through the first year, so I must not be traumatized anymore." But I only realized this year that now I'm okay. And I've seen 18 megafires since then. And I see it. And when I go there, like, I don't relive my own trauma. I listen, and I focus on the humanity and the opportunity. And I think that that's what's going to actually get us through. But paying attention, though, like, you have to be consciously paying attention to what you focus on.
I think you nailed it. You've got to realize that first year, or whatever amount of time that is, for that scar tissue to kind of develop and get you tougher and have your life back, and then focusing on all the positives you can, everything positive, helping people. Just keeps us going. I wake up every day and I can't wait to get to, in my case, to my computer.
COVID shortened all of our commutes. There's that.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, Jim, it's such a pleasure. I'm so very happy to know you, but also I'm excited for whatever comes next in the
Yeah,
sense
me
of,
too.
how we can make impact together. And my favorite thing about the space, and I just sort of say it, I love the humanity that meets me on the ground in a disaster.
Yeah.
And I really, really adore the quality of the people that I actually get to meet in this space. I'm excited for a wildfire summit because I feel like I know all these cool people. Everybody else gets to, you should all meet each other now. Do you know,
Yeah.
I love that piece so much. And we want to do it every year. So hopefully next year, you'll be able to make it directly. But again, thank you so much for your time and your attention for all the work that you do.
Absolutely. Mutual Admiration Society. I already put it on my calendar for next year, so you better have it.
Okay.
So yeah, looking forward to it.
Mhm.
Just excited to have Jake being able to go. The work that you've done, the energy you've channeled into, from your own trauma and your own learnings to help other people is inspiring. So thank you for bringing me along.
Thank you. All right. Well, this has been an episode of the How to Disaster podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, How to Disaster. For more information, please visit our website at afterthefireusa.org. And if you liked this video, please hit subscribe.